Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad podcast with Chris Finn, a production of P4S Golf. Welcome back to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. My name is Chris Finn. I'm your host, and I am here with the star of any and all things P4S Golf, Mr. Josh Leyes. Josh, how are you today, man?
I am all right. Thank you for that warm welcome.
This is actually our second time recording this.
That's right.
This is how important it is for us to share this solution with you to your golf game that most people have no idea even exists. We recorded this actually already and then realized the wrong mic was recording and it sounded terrible. So here we are. This is how committed we are to you, the listener. We're doing it again.
Important message to get out to the people.
So talk to us, Josh. So obviously your background, just for anyone who doesn't know Josh, if they've been living under a rock recently. So Josh is probably the greatest golf fitness coach, golf performance coach that I've ever met. Thankfully, he said he'd come work with us on our team. And if you ever get a chance, an opportunity, you're coming through Raleigh, drop in, ask to work in a class that he's coaching. Good luck getting in. They're usually full, but he's done everything from in person to virtual. He's built a ton of the systems that we have and been a huge part of the research that we're doing in terms of getting golfers to where they need to be. So you've been around the block. You've done this a few thousand, 10,000 times. What is this? This was your idea for the episode. So what is this simplest solution that people really have no idea exists?
Yeah, and it is often the simplest solutions can be the most obvious ones that people might not look for. They're thinking they're turning over every stone when they're trying to improve golf performance. And the main reason I came to realize this is because I'm a golfer as well, so I'm trying to figure out how I can perform better. Where do I need to look? And most golfers, when we're looking at golf performance, there's several pieces of the pie we want to explore. One being equipment, and most people will turn to that first because it's the one that's advertised the most, and it's ooh, shiny new things. It's this is going to help me.
Doesn't make you sore. You don't need to sweat.
That's right.
Walk in, swipe the card, and magically
new driver. And I mean,
there's no pain or suffering to get it. The return is immediate.
Exactly. Yep. And that's not to say that if you've got a 10-year-old, 15-year-old driver and you get custom fit for a new one, you're probably going to get some gains.
I'll tell you what, I finally got rid of my Nike irons that were 9 years old that they no longer make anymore. It's amazing what grooves do.
All of a sudden you're spinning it. It's like the ball's checking. That's great. So equipment is definitely a piece of the pie when it comes to performance. But we also want to look at golfers will usually look towards technique next. So when they're trying to get better, it's I want to be more consistent with my swing. I'm going to work with an instructor, which is great. You do want to maximize technique so that your swing is a little more consistent. Your dispersion or your misses get smaller so that you can have some kind of predictability in your game. And that's really huge. But when we look at the physical characteristics of what powers those first two things, so your body is really, golf equipment manufacturers would say the golf ball is the only piece of equipment that I use on every shot, which is true to some extent, but
unless you lose
that golf ball is not going to move anywhere without you swinging the club. Correct. So your body is really that 15th club. I like to say that's what's in control of everything. So if you don't kind of do a really thorough audit of where your body's at in terms of physical characteristics, you're really shortchanging yourself on how far you can go in terms of your golf performance. So I would say looking at your body, mobility would be one characteristic of the physical side, and then we're going to look at speed and power. So those two things, really diving into them with a fine-tooth comb, is so important. And that first one, the mobility side, often really gets overlooked, and that's where I came to realize this probably early on in my career, listening to people that were way smarter than me. Gray Cook is a physical therapist, and Mike Boyle, a world-renowned strength coach, they were probably in a bar talking one night and just spitballing, and they ended up coming up with a sort of a philosophy of movement called the joint by joint approach. And that was really revolutionary for me, and it helped me learn how to explain the importance of mobility and stability to clients and golfers in a way that made sense to them. And they're like, oh, so this is why I'm having trouble doing this in my swing, or this is why my back hurts all the time, or maybe they're just having trouble with everyday movements in life. So And the core premise of that joint by joint approach, as they call it, is that it really boils down to movement working in an alternating pattern of stable segments and mobile joints. So I'll say that again. Your body's designed to work in an alternating pattern of stable segments and mobile joints. If that pattern is disrupted, then compensation, dysfunction, and usually injury and pain are going to be a result. So we have to make sure that is first and foremost when we're looking at the golf.
For sure. Yeah. And so I guess talk to me, or I guess to me, but also to the person listening. What is, like, we say joint by joint, like which joints?
Right. So typically I like to start from the ground up. Okay. Some people will start from the top down, but I usually start from the ground up because golf is it's
kind of like a good golfer swing starts from the ground up.
Exactly. And
Bobby, I'm gonna roast him a little bit. He's on here a bunch, but our director of research, if you guys haven't listened to him already, super smart guy, but he definitely sometimes will start from the top down in his golf swing.
And maybe his neck ends up with a sore as a result. But
exactly.
Like, so from the ground up, golf is you are controlling the club with your arms and hands, but the force that comes through that club basically starts from you pushing against the ground. And if you've got a stable trunk, then you can generate that force through the body. But from the ground, if we look at your feet are really designed to be a stable platform to work from, so that you've got some stability there. Think of them as tires on the road. Yeah. You really want to be able to grab the ground. The next thing that needs to be able to move, so we go stable, then we go mobile. We look at your ankle joint. It's not a true ball and socket, but there's so many bones in there that make up that joint. It should be able to move in multiple planes of motion. Yeah. So that's how you can load into one foot and then push off into the other one. So those ankles need to be able to rotate a fair bit. Next joint up is your knee. It's a straight hinge joint, really. I usually say the knees and the elbows are more like the hinges on a door. They just mainly work in one plane of motion. Right. So that's a stable joint. It's fairly fixed in terms of the directions it's supposed to move. Yeah. You get too much rotation in the knee, that's when you get a lot of overuse. Yeah. The next joint up, or the next segment up, is your hip socket. And that's a straight ball and socket joint. It's just designed, it's engineered for a ton of mobility and movement in all planes of motion. So it's just designed to be mobile. Then the next segment up, we've got your lower back and pelvis. And people will usually call that their core. That's designed to be very stable. So that's why people will do a lot of stability work. So it shouldn't move a ton. We should get some flexion and extension out of it, but it's not designed to rotate. And that's where a lot of golfers will, unfortunately, use that lower back to rotate. Which
I think people don't understand that. What's always was fascinating to me is, I forget where I was the first time I heard it. I went and looked it up, but like literally the entire lumbar spine, if you added every single L1, L2, L3, L4, L5 to S1, every single one of those joints in total only would be able to provide technically like 13 degrees of rotation.
All of them combined.
All of them combined. And then you look at, like, I was talking to somebody and they were like talking about on tour how they were looking at shoulder turn, which is actually obviously spinal turn on TV last weekend. They're like, oh, look, this guy gets to 97 degrees turn. This guy gets to 118 degrees turn. It's like, so 118 degrees, only 13 of that should come from your low back.
Right.
Like, I wonder why people have back issues, because they try to overuse that area.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's because the hips probably don't rotate enough. So your body has to make it up somewhere. Yeah. And once we go from that lower back, that should be a stable segment. We've got your thoracic spine, or your mid spine, your trunk, essentially a torso. I usually tell people if you think of a spring, it should be able to bend and twist like a slinky. You can move it in all directions. Like, it should be very mobile. Right. And then we go out to the extremities. Your shoulder, it's kind of a complicated joint because it's two kind of parts. Like the shoulder girdles, where your shoulder blade sits on your upper back and rib cage. That part should be relatively stable. It kind of elevates, depresses, moves forward and back a little bit. But then that shoulder socket, where your arm attaches to that shoulder blade, should be, again, that's sort of a ball and socket, but it should be very mobile. Yeah. Then your elbows, that hinge, it should be stable. Wrist should be really mobile. And then your hand or grip should be quite stable. Yeah. So again, if you don't have stability where you're supposed to have it in those stable segments, and you don't have mobility in those joints, the most common example for us is a lack of internal rotation in that lead hip, or the trail hip, leads to a lot of excess movement at the pelvis and lumbar spine, which should be stable, but it's trying to make up for that lack of movement in the hips, and sometimes the trunk as well. So it's caught between I will tell people you're literally your lower back's caught between a rock and a hard place, and it's just trying to do the best it can, and it ends up side bending and twisting and rotating, and all of a sudden after playing 18 holes, you're done for 2 days.
I always call the low back, it's the friendly neighbor who's willing to help out. And eventually it helps out one too many times. It's like, forget you. I'm not, you can't have any more butter. I'm not coming to help you move that chair.
That's right.
It just throws up its hands. I'm hurt. I'm done. I was actually, I knew we were going to talk about this today, and I was driving home from the gym, and I was all sweaty, and so I put the seat, I put it all the way down so I wouldn't get it all sweaty. And I forgot to change the shirt. So I'm driving and thinking of stable mobile. And normally, if you're sitting in your chair, like you're driving right now, think of you're sitting in your chair, your steering wheel, consider that the mobile joint. Yeah. Right. Your seat provides you the stability. So then it's very easy to drive. You can move that steering wheel wherever you want. Yeah. Well, if you put your back, literally right now, no, hopefully we can't get in trouble with this, but put the back of your seat all the way flat, so you have to hold yourself up, and now and then you're going to have to use your steering wheel basically to create some stability. So now you're using the mobile thing to create some stability. It's a little harder to drive, right? All of a sudden it's harder to control the mobility because you took away the stability that the chair was giving you, right? And so I'm driving this is kind of a cool analogy. That if someone's listening to the podcast, they can literally do this right now. Now, total disclaimer, I'm not telling you to do it. Try it maybe when you're parked somewhere safe. But it was just a cool analogy as I'm driving down the road, and I'm wow, if I have to turn, it's actually harder versus if I'm leaning back, I can just spin the wheel whichever way I need to spin it. Yeah.
So having that stability where you need it is super, super important.
Oh, and it got me thinking, and this is, I think, what a lot of people don't realize is, if you don't have the control, particularly of those mobile joints, right? So I always think of the pyramid, right? You got to have the mobility on the bottom. And then the next step, you got to have the stability. You got to have the control, motor control of that, neurologically be able to control the joints. If you don't have the motor control, let's say, of your hip, the number one thing your body will do is get rid of the mobility and lock it down. Yeah. So now there's less total mobility to control, so it's easier. Yeah. Right. So the more kind of motor control you have, the more stability you have around that joint, the easier it is to move it around. And that to me was the seat. When I flattened the seat down, I took away my motor control. Yeah. And then I was hanging on for dear life on the steering wheel to try to make turns. Especially if I was messing around with it. So you accelerate hard, and it wants to push you back. Yeah. You don't have the seat, so you're holding on to the steering wheel to keep it up there. And then if it's coming around a turn,
so keeping the car in a straight line. Yeah. Is probably a big
do this in an empty parking lot with no cars around you. It's actually kind of a cool little experiment, but it gives you a sense of, hey, if I remove stability, I'm going to want to restrict the mobility of the steering wheel in order to help stabilize me. I thought it was just kind of a cool, today analogy.
Exactly. And I think some people will have really good stability in the areas where it should be. If people will do planks and, a lot of core work and say, I got to work on my core to keep my lower back safe, which is great. Yeah. But if you do core work, but neglect the mobility below and above the core, so if your trunk doesn't turn enough, and your hips don't rotate enough, when you go to swing that golf club, your body wants to make a full turn and it's got to rotate. So if you can't rotate from your hips and your trunk, your core, which is strong, is going to say, you know what, I'm going to want to get a full backswing and I want to get some speed here. So I'm going to let go of some of that stability because I can't rotate, and just we'll be the helpful neighbor and get that movement, and then your lower back pays the price. Yeah. So that's the classic example of not being mobile in the right spots. But I think a great illustration too is people that going on from mobility and stability, the people that maybe they don't have the physical strength, right? And they don't have the horsepower to actually support what they're trying to do. The classic example would be maybe the person who's a low handicap or scratch golfer, and that they're actually, maybe their mobility is not too bad, but they're severely underpowered in terms of how much force they can physically produce. So their horsepower is limited, but they've kind of figured out through technique, which is a great avenue to explore, but they've maxed out their technique, and they don't have the physical strength or power to support that technique. So they're pretty much, they've got that car. I love car analogies, but the car is pretty much at the red line every time they swing, because they can only jump 4 inches off the ground. They can throw the ball maybe 10, 12 feet. So those, again, for those of you that haven't listened before, like our two key power metrics are going to be that vertical jump, which measures how much force you can put down through the ground. It's a key performance indicator. And our seated chest pass with the medicine ball measures how much force you can express through the arms. If you are limited, that's essentially how much horsepower you have as a golfer.
Yeah.
So we've done enough research to know if you throw the ball this far and you jump this high, okay, you're probably driving around in a 6 or an 8-cylinder car. You got decent power.
Mm-hmm.
But if your vertical jump's really low and your seated chest pass isn't very far, oh, well, you're probably driving around in a 4-cylinder 89 Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
But when you say you're swinging 102 miles an hour, you've got that.
You got that in every swing.
Florida red line, like you said before. Maybe you're hitting maybe you've installed the aftermarket NOS kit, and you've got that
Fast and the Furious reference.
You're driving the car faster than it's really designed to go.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So your body needs to be able to support the speed that you're swinging.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So after mobility and stability, we definitely need enough strength and power to support the move that you want to make in your swing.
Right.
So if you're looking to gain speed, that is a huge area that needs to be explored.
Yeah, I think that's, I think to your point, the better golfer, single digit scratch player who has optimized lag and, P5 is great. Like their timing is good.
Yeah.
So I think that's always one of the most fascinating things that for me, as we've done all the research, has been physically somebody shouldn't be able to swing that fast.
Right.
But they're able to leverage the skill level that they have in the game of golf to get that club moving faster. Yeah. And then now you have this object moving faster than the body is actually capable of, sustaining for a long period of time. I think, think of that for your first, listening right now, think of your first car and floor it every single time around every corner. You may get around the first couple, but eventually it's going to end poorly. And I think that's where we see the injury rates that we do see of people driving cars that they're wishing they were a higher model, better suspension, when in reality they're just not there. Yeah,
and a golfer, like we said, will try and trade up on the equipment side. They'll try and trade up and level up on the technique side.
They'll get the cool rims put on there. They'll get a new paint job.
But if the engine and the suspension, which I'll equate to, strength and mobility, and then strength, mobility, and power, that's essentially your engine, your suspension, all those things that keep the car on the road and power it. That's all going to be essentially the most important thing. So let's not get distracted by the shiny objects and make sure your body is actually fit to do what it's supposed to in the golf swing.
100%. Well, Josh, thanks so much, man. This is hopefully eye-opening for all of you listening of the simplest thing that you need to be looking at is do you have that mobility and do you have the strength and the power numbers to support how fast you're actually going. And I think we'll definitely make sure we link to the safe speed calculator that we have, as well as the home assessment below. Definitely check out, we haven't talked a ton about the safe speed calculator that we do have for all of you. It's totally free. Click on it. It basically, you put in your physical metrics based on the tests, and it'll tell you how fast your body, based on from a physical perspective, how fast you should be safely swinging. Yeah.
So if you're swinging over that, chances are, if you're not stiff and sore, you probably will be if you keep doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
Well, that's addressing what we just talked about.
I think one of my favorite stories of that is Dennis Paulson. He's one of the hosts of Inside the Ropes on PGA Tour Radio. When he started, we were working with him. He did the testing. He was swinging about 108 to 110. And when he did the testing, his safe speed was 92. And his number one complaint was how bad his back hurt, how even if he did yard work, he was laid out for a day or two. And the cool thing is, he's worked with us, his speed, I think maybe has gone up 1 or 2 miles an hour, hasn't moved a ton. But the big thing is that difference between where he's swinging and that safe speed is pretty much leveled out. Yeah. And now he can play. Now all of a sudden he's like, okay, well, maybe I do want to swing faster. Maybe I do want to play more golf, right? And so now he can go do yard work. He can go play multiple days in a row without pain. And that's just simply a nature of closing the gap between where your body is able to handle and where you're wanting to drive your car.
Yeah, exactly.
So he upgraded his suspension. He upgraded his engine. He probably got the paint job and the rims too, right? They get the new clubs and all that fun, fancy stuff. But if we don't take care of the core components, there's going to be breakdown. So hopefully we diffused a few, little ticking time bombs that are listening out there. Josh, thanks so much for being here with us.
Anytime, man.
If you guys enjoyed that, Josh is everywhere on social media, on our YouTube channels. our on demand, our private coaching virtually. So definitely check out anytime you get a chance to connect and listen to Josh. I highly recommend you do so. One of the smartest guys in the industry. So thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Anytime. Thanks,
awesome.
guys.
Awesome, guys. We'll see. Thanks for the time. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.